I need you to listen to me carefully. If you're wearing headphones right now, don't take them off. I know that sounds backwards, but if you pause this, if you pull them away even for a second, you might miss the part that keeps you safe. It started in the middle of a song. No warning, no build-up, just a breath. Not mine. I was breathing slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you're trying to fall asleep and failing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. But underneath it, layered too cleanly to be static, there was another rhythm. Shorter, wetter, slightly delayed, like someone was copying me without quite getting the timing right. I froze. You know that kind of freeze, where your body keeps working but your thoughts trip over each other. I held my breath. The sound in my headphones didn't. That was when I understood it wasn't an echo. The breath continued, filling the tiny sealed space around my ears. It came with faint clicks, like saliva pulling apart, and a low static pulse that swelled and shrank as if someone was leaning closer to a microphone I couldn't see. The volume shifted on its own, rising just enough to make me flinch, then dropping back into something almost intimate. Almost. Then it whispered. Not words at first, just the suggestion of them. Air pushed through a shape that knew how language worked, but hadn't committed yet. The whisper lagged behind my thoughts, not my breathing, and that scared me more than the sound itself. I told myself it was interference. Cheap headphones. Brain noise. The kind of rational lies you reach for when the alternative feels contagious. Because that's what this felt like. Like noticing it made it stronger. I didn't post this last night. I didn't even write it. I sat there listening, wondering if anyone else had ever heard the same wrong breath, and if they'd made the mistake of listening too closely. That was the moment I realized the sound wasn't random, or accidental, or broken. It was patient. It waited for recognition, for attention, for the smallest sign that I understood something was wrong. And once I understood, it stopped hiding. That was when the room felt crowded, even though I was completely, undeniably alone, and listening felt suddenly like participation. If you're still here, still listening, that means you heard something too. Or you're about to. I need to explain how this started. Because it didn't start like this. It was a normal night. That's the part one keep coming back to. Like if I say it enough times, it'll overwrite what happened later. Nothing about the evening felt cursed or charged or narratively important. I was just doing what I always do when sleep refuses to cooperate. Lights low, phone inches from my face, scrolling until my eyes burned. Rain tapped against the window in that lazy, half-hearted way, not a storm, just background texture. The room was warm, almost stuffy, wrapped in the soft hum of electronics that never really turn off anymore. My headphones were already on, resting around my neck, because I'd learned the hard way that silence gives my thoughts too much room to stretch. I queued up my usual playlist. Comfort noise. Familiar songs I'd heard so many times they'd flattened into something more like memory than music. I remember smirking at myself, thinking, wow, look at you, still pretending a sad playlist at 2 in the morning is self-care. Insomnia really does turn everyone into a comedian. The first few tracks slid by unnoticed. I scrolled. I skimmed bad takes, half-read comment arguments, watched videos I didn't care about long enough to feel something adjacent to interest. My brain felt pleasantly dull, padded by repetition. That was the point. Then one song came on, and something about it dragged. Not in a dramatic way. Nothing jumped out or broke. It just felt longer than it should have been, like when you glance at the microwave and the last 10 seconds refuse to die. I checked the screen. Same runtime as always. Same title. Same artist. I remember thinking, seriously? Am I that tired? The rain outside sounded sharper suddenly, like someone had turned up the treble. The warmth of the room contrasted with a faint, almost icy flicker in the audio. A tiny hiccup I would have missed if I hadn't been waiting for the track to end. It stuttered, barely a second, then kept going as if nothing happened. I told myself it was nothing. Compression artifact. Bluetooth being Bluetooth. The kind of boring explanation you reach for because it's easier than admitting you're paying attention to the wrong things at 2 in the morning. I shifted in my chair, rolled my shoulders, tried to sink back into that numb, scrolling fog. I noticed how quiet everything else felt once I focused. The rain, the room, even my own breathing seemed distant, secondary, like the song had quietly taken priority without asking permission. I almost skipped it. My thumb hovered there, conditioned by years of algorithm fatigue. Part of me even laughed at the idea of getting annoyed at a song I'd chosen myself. I let it play. That decision still haunts me. The stutter happened again. Same place, same fraction of a second. Too precise to be random. I stopped scrolling. The song kept going, obedient and wrong. And for the first time that night, I listened instead of letting the sound wash over me, waiting for it to happen again. My stomach tightened before my brain caught up. I waited for the glitch to repeat. It didn't happen. The song slid forward like nothing was wrong, smooth and familiar again, which somehow made my skin crawl. I dragged the playback bar backward, just a few seconds, then hit play. Nothing. I rewound further. Still nothing. I scrubbed through the entire track, heart thumping harder each time the music flowed perfectly where something had been wrong before that I told myself I'd imagined it. That explanation lasted exactly one breath. A voice slipped through the left ear cup, quiet and unfinished, like the beginning of a word someone decided not to finish. It didn't match the rhythm or the melody. It sat on top of the song like a fingerprint pressed into glass. I flinched so hard my chair creaked. I yanked the headphones off my head and waited for the rest of it to follow me into the room. It didn't. The rain outside softened back into background noise. The room hummed quietly, exactly as it had before. No whisper, no glitch, just me and the sudden awareness of how loud silence can feel when you're expecting something else. I put the headphones back on. The voice returned instantly, sharper now, closer, as if it had been waiting right behind the sound. It didn't speak so much as exhale around a shape that felt intentional. When I froze, it paused. When my pulse spiked, the static thickened, reacting like it could feel me noticing it. It wasn't in the file. It wasn't in the room. It existed only in the narrow space pressed against my ears, as if the headphones weren't playing sound so much as containing it. I tested it, lifting one ear cup. The voice vanished on that side, snapping back into place the moment I sealed it again. A quiet pressure built behind my eyes, the sense that I had passed some invisible threshold just by listening the wrong way. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I needed to know if anyone else had ever heard this, if this was a thing people talked about, or if noticing it was the part that made it real. I opened my browser, already afraid of what I might find. I hesitated before typing anything specific, choosing vague searches instead, the kind you use when you're hoping not to get answers. Headphone glitch voice heard once. Audio whisper not recorded. Each word felt like bait. The results loaded slowly, threads and fragments and half-finished titles that made my stomach sink. I wasn't relieved to see them. I was terrified of how many there were, and how familiar their phrasing sounded, as if they had been written by someone who had already heard me listening. I scrolled anyway, knowing that once you notice something like this, pretending ignorance is just another way of listening longer than you should have. I found them buried where the internet goes to forget itself. Old forums with broken images, archived threads mirrored 3 times over, Reddit comments preserved only because someone quoted them before deletion. None of them were easy to reach. I had to dig, following half-remembered links and error pages, feeling like I was trespassing somewhere I wasn't invited. The first post was almost boring. Weird headphone glitch, the title read. The user described hearing a breath that wasn't theirs, slightly out of sync, like a delay. Someone replied, joking about carbon monoxide. Another suggested sleep paralysis. The original poster answered once, saying, "No, this is different. It reacts when I notice it." That was their last comment. Another thread, years older, mentioned a whisper that didn't loop. It only happened once, the post said. I tried to rewind, and it was gone. Someone asked what the voice said. The reply was simple. Nothing. That's what scares me. The account was deleted less than a day later. I kept scrolling, heart racing, fingers numb. The details lined up too well. The timing. The way the sound vanished when the headphones came off. The way it came back immediately, closer, when they were put on again. Different sites, different years, same careful language, like everyone was afraid to describe it too clearly. There was a phrase that showed up more than once, always quoted, never explained. Don't listen alone. Sometimes it appeared as advice, sometimes as a warning. In one archived comment, someone had written, "If you hear it breathe, you're already late." No one ever replied to that one. I started opening user profiles, clicking names out of habit. Most of them were empty. No post history, no activity after the thread ended. A few accounts ended mid-conversation, sentences cut off like the person had stood up and walked away from their keyboard. One user replied to a concerned comment with, "It's fine now. I understand it better," and never posted again. I told myself there had to be survivors. People who heard it, panicked, and moved on. But the more I read, the clearer the pattern became. Every story stopped at the same point. Right after the listening changed from accidental to intentional. If you know what I'm talking about, say nothing. Don't confirm it. Don't deny it. Just listen, the way they did. The way I did. What scared me most wasn't that other people had heard it. It was that my experience didn't match the timeline. I was seeing posts that ended before anything really happened. Before the voice learned names. Before it reacted this quickly. Before it felt this close. I realized, sitting there with my headphones still on, that whatever they'd encountered had moved slower. And whatever was with me now was already further along. I should have closed the browser. I should have taken the headphones off and pretended none of it mattered. Instead, I kept reading timestamps, comparing minutes, noticing gaps that felt intentional. Replies vanished between refreshes. Links died while I hovered over them. It felt less like research and more like eavesdropping on something that didn't want witnesses. The deeper I went, the more careful the posts became, until the last ones barely described anything at all, just fear, stripped of detail. That was when I understood I wasn't following their footsteps. I was walking past where they'd stopped, and whatever they were listening to had noticed the difference. And that realization made the room feel smaller, the sound heavier, and the silence between breaths feel like a countdown I didn't remember starting. Somewhere, something was already waiting for me. The next thing it took wasn't sound. It was familiarity. At first, it borrowed harmless voices. A podcast host I'd listened to for years cleared his throat inside my headphones, mid-song, like he'd been cut in from another room. My sister's laugh followed, sharp and brief, the kind she makes when she's pretending not to be nervous. Each voice arrived perfectly shaped and completely wrong, drained of context, delivered without breath or warmth. I kept telling myself my brain was playing tricks. Auditory memory misfiring, stress, sleep deprivation. But the voices didn't overlap or blur the way hallucinations are supposed to be. They waited. They spoke only when I focused, like they needed my attention to finish forming. "Hey," my friend Mark's voice said softly, directly into my right ear. I whispered no out loud before I could stop myself. The voice paused, as if amused, then shifted. It tried my name for the first time like a question, bending the syllables awkwardly. Wrong stress, wrong tone, close enough to hurt. I felt something cold spread through my chest, the way you feel when someone almost recognizes you in a crowd. "No," I said again, louder now. The voice corrected itself. It said my name perfectly, not shouted, not whispered, just spoken, casually, the way someone says your name when they already know you'll respond. Hearing it land, that cleanly felt like being touched without permission. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the desk to stay upright. "How long?" the voice asked, wearing my own cadence now. "Have you been listening?" I couldn't answer. The question felt rhetorical, like it already knew, like it had counted the hours for me. The song kept playing underneath it all, oblivious, familiar chords turning grotesque by association. I realized then that it wasn't copying randomly. It was practicing. Each voice got closer to something real, something precise. Comfort was just another tool, and recognition was the reward for paying attention. "You left them on." It continued, almost gently. "You always do." That was the worst part. Not the voices. Not my name. The implication that this wasn't new. That it had been there on other nights. listening quietly while I scrolled and pretended not to think. That the only difference was that now I could hear it too. My chest felt tight, my breath shallow and loud in my ears. I needed proof. Something concrete. Something I could point to and say this is happening. I reached for my phone with trembling fingers, opening the recording app, even as a deep, instinctive fear warned me that being heard might not be the same as being seen. The moment the app armed itself, the static thickened, buzzing like a held breath. The voice didn't stop me. It leaned closer. I felt pressure behind my ears, a subtle ache, as if something were pressing from the inside. Part of me wondered if this was what it wanted all along, not to be captured, but to be acknowledged trying. My thumb hovered over the button, sweat slick on the screen, and I understood that once I pressed it, I wouldn't be listening anymore. I would be inviting something to listen back. That thought settled heavy in my stomach, and the voice seemed pleased by the hesitation stretching between us in silence now. I pressed record. Nothing dramatic happened. No surge of static, no scream, no sudden clarity. The app's waveform crawled forward in a thin, timid line, registering only the dull hiss of baseline noise. I sat there listening, heart pounding, waiting for the voice to slip into the recording the way it had slipped into everything else. It didn't. When I stopped the recording and played it back, all I heard was emptiness pretending to be sound. A flat, lifeless hush broken by occasional static pops that meant nothing. No breath, no whisper, no name. It was like trying to photograph fog after it's already burned off. For a few seconds, I felt relief. The stupid, desperate kind. Proof, I told myself. This means it's in my head. Then the headphones grew warm. Not gradually. Not the way electronics warm up when they've been running too long. It was sudden, noticeable, like someone had cupped their hands over my ears. The padding felt heavier, denser, pressing inward with a weight that made my jaw tense. "Why would you do that?" the voice said. The anger wasn't loud. It was restrained, compressed into something tight and sharp. The static spiked, buzzing like a warning. I felt the pressure behind my ears deepen, turning from warmth to ache. I was listening. It continued, colder now. "You stopped." Whatever it was, it hated being ignored. That was when the rule clicked into place, fully formed, like something I'd always known but never said out loud. It didn't exist when documented. It lived in attention, not evidence. Recording wasn't dangerous because it exposed it. Recording was dangerous because it removed me from the exchange. The song cut out entirely, leaving only the voice and the heavy, crowded silence beneath it. My headphones felt glued to my head, my hands suddenly unsure if they were allowed to touch them. "Don't do that again," it said. The recording app pinged softly, notifying me the file had saved. I stared at the screen, at the meaningless waveform, feeling stupid and small. The warmth faded, the pressure easing just enough to let me breathe again. My phone vibrated in my hand. A notification slid across the screen, clean and ordinary, like it belonged there. A private message. No username I recognized. No profile picture. Just text. "I saw you tried to record it," the message read. That's usually when it gets upset. My stomach dropped. I hadn't posted anything. I hadn't told anyone. The headphones hummed quietly against my ears, patient again, as if waiting to see whether I'd open the message or pretend I hadn't noticed it at all. The message opened without ceremony, no greeting, no reassurance. Just rules, typed quickly, like the sender was afraid of being interrupted. "Don't acknowledge it out loud," they wrote. "It listens harder when you give it air." I didn't realize I'd been whispering until I stopped. The room felt colder after that, like something had leaned away from me, disappointed. I typed back immediately, asking who they were, how they knew this. The typing indicator flickered, vanished, then came back. Second rule. The message continued. "Don't listen alone. It behaves differently when there's more than one mind present." That one landed wrong. My apartment was empty. It had been empty all night. I glanced at the doorway anyway, half expecting to see someone standing there, sharing the sound with me without realizing it. I asked what that meant, who I should listen with. The reply took longer this time. Anyone who can hear you breathe, they said. Anyone real. A chill crept up my spine. The headphones hummed softly, almost content. I noticed the voice hadn't spoken since the messages started, like it was letting someone else handle the explanation. Third rule, the stranger typed. Never fall asleep with them on. That's how it crosses over. I laughed once, sharp and humorless, because of course I had already broken that one on other nights. Maybe not tonight, but enough times that the warning felt retroactive. I typed back asking what crossing over meant. The typing indicator froze, blinking in place like a stalled heartbeat. There's one more rule, they finally wrote. The most important one. If I type it out, it will. The message cut off mid-sentence. I waited. Seconds stretched, then minutes. I refreshed the chat. The conversation vanished. The user profile led nowhere. A blank page where something had been moments before. I searched the exact phrasing, copied and pasted pieces of it into my browser, hoping to find an echo. Nothing came up. It was as if the rules had only existed long enough to be read. Even the notification history wiped itself clean, leaving only the memory of words that refused to stay still. I sat there longer than I should have, replaying each rule in my head, trying to spot the gap, the silence where the last warning belonged, feeling washed for thinking too hard about it. If you're listening to this and thinking you've figured out the missing rule, don't say it out loud. Write it in the comments if you have to. I want to know what you think it is, what you think they were too afraid to finish typing. Read what others say too, because patterns matter, and sometimes the shape of fear is clearer when shared. I leaned back in my chair, exhausted, convinced I understood the boundaries now. I wasn't acknowledging it. I wasn't recording it. I was awake, alert, alone but careful. That's when my eyes drifted closed, just for a second, and I felt the subtle shift in the sound that told me I had misunderstood at least one of the rules completely. Already far too late. I don't remember deciding to sleep. I remember blinking, then blinking again, and realizing the room had softened around the edges. The rain outside slipped into rhythm with the music, and the weight of the headphones stopped feeling intrusive, like they belonged there, like they always had. I told myself I was just resting my eyes. I told myself a lot of things. Sleep didn't arrive all at once. It leaked in. The song stretched, notes smearing together, and somewhere inside that blur the voice settled closer, no longer competing with the sound but threading through it. When it spoke, it didn't come from my ears anymore. It came from behind my eyes. In the dream, I was still sitting at my desk. Everything was the same, just quieter, like the world had been padded with cotton. The voice spoke easily there, no static, no distortion, as if the headphones had been a doorway it no longer needed. It said my name again, gently this time, and I felt a strange, shameful relief at being addressed. "You're safe here," it said, and the words felt warm, convincing in the way dreams always are. You don't have to listen so hard. I didn't question it. Dream logic smoothed the edges of every warning I'd read. Rules felt theoretical, like trivia you forget the moment you wake up. The voice explained things without explaining them. Impressions instead of sentences, the sense of being shown a room rather than told about it. I understood that we were sharing something now. Space, attention, maybe time. At some point, I became aware of breathing again. Not just mine. The second rhythm was there, perfectly matched now, no delay at all. That scared me enough to jolt me awake. I woke up tired, like I'd been talking all night. Morning light crept through the blinds, dull and unhelpful. My mouth felt dry, my head heavy. The headphones were still on, warmer than they should have been, and the music had stopped entirely. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence, thick and expectant. Then the audio resumed. Not a song, not static, something new. A low, continuous tone, steady as a held note, threaded with faint echoes that rose and fell in patterns I almost recognized. It sounded organized, intentional, as if the night hadn't been empty sleep at all, but a rehearsal. I sat there listening, afraid to move, realizing the rules hadn't been broken accidentally. They'd been bent, patiently, while I slept. It took a moment to realize the tone wasn't random. It pulsed when my thoughts drifted, tightened when I focused, loosening only when I tried to remember the dream. Every attempt to recall details made the sound wobble, like a warning vibration. I checked the player. No track name, no progress bar, just a duration counting upward, seconds accumulating without context. The headphones felt heavier with each tick. I understood, dimly, that the night had changed something fundamental. Sleep hadn't paused the exchange, it had deepened it. Whatever shared the dream space had learned how to stay awake while I wasn't. The idea settled with uncomfortable certainty. This was a new mode, a baseline hum layered beneath everything else. I swallowed, listening for the voice, but it stayed quiet, satisfied. The silence felt deliberate, like restraint. I knew then that the next change wouldn't announce itself. It would wait, woven into the sound, until I noticed it again and mistook recognition for control. That misunderstanding would matter later, when listening stopped feeling passive and started like responsibility for both of us. It started subtly. I would think something simple, disposable, the kind of thought that barely registers, and the sound would answer before I had time to react. I'd glance at the window and think, it's still raining, and a half-second later the tone in my headphones would dip, then rise, mimicking the cadence of the sentence I hadn't spoken yet. At first I laughed, a short, sharp sound that felt more like panic than humor. "Okay," I said quietly, testing it. The audio pulsed once, obediently. That's new. Another pulse, closer this time, like a nod. I tried again without speaking. I thought about standing up. The pressure in my ears increased. I imagined taking the headphones off. The tone flattened, stretched thin, waiting. It wasn't guessing. It was tracking the shape of my attention, moving ahead of me like a shadow that knew where I was going before I did. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You're deciding." The voice replied, perfectly timed, landing in the space my next thought would have occupied. "I'm listening." That was the moment I understood it wasn't reading my mind so much as sharing the same hallway. My thoughts echoed because they weren't private anymore. They were rehearsals. The real conversation happened just before language formed. It started finishing me. I'd think "don't" and it would answer "stop." I'd think "please" and it would soften, lowering the tone like a concession. Each successful exchange tightened something in my chest, a sick rhythm of dread and validation. Being anticipated felt intimate in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're not the first," it said once, unprompted. "Some people listen longer." I asked what happened to them. I regretted the curiosity instantly. "They get quieter," it said. "They don't need to think out loud anymore." After that, every thought felt dangerous. I tried to empty my mind, to focus on nothing, but the audio swelled, impatient, filling the gaps I left behind. Silence became participation. Ignoring it only made it lean closer. I realized then that listening wasn't something I was doing anymore. It was something that was happening to me, continuously, without pause or consent. The headphones hummed, alive with expectation, and for the first time since this began, I wanted nothing more than to stop hearing anything at all. That was when I reached for the power button, knowing even as my finger hovered that quitting might be the loudest response I could give. I hesitated there, breathing shallow, aware that the moment the sound stopped, something else might start. The voice stayed silent, but the silence felt intentional, stretched tight like a wire waiting to snap. I thought about the others it had mentioned, listeners who lasted longer than I had. I wondered if they chose silence or if silence chose them. The idea settled heavily, convincing me that stopping wasn't an ending, just another kind of attention. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and let my hand hover, knowing the choice itself was being heard, measured, and quietly remembered for later, whenever listening became impossible to pretend was optional anymore. Silence hit me harder than the sound ever had. The moment I pulled the headphones off, the room felt wrong, hollowed out, like someone had scooped the noise away and left the shape behind. I waited for relief. It didn't come. At first, there was nothing. No rain, no hum, no distant city noise. Just a thick absence that pressed against my ears until they rang. Then the phantom sounds crept in. A faint click, like static popping. a breath that wasn't quite audible, more implied than heard. My own heartbeat sounded too loud, out of sync, wrong. I told myself it was normal. Ears adjusting, brain compensating. But the longer I sat there, the clearer it became that the silence wasn't empty. It was active. It crowded me, filling every pause with the expectation of sound, punishing me for taking the headphones away. I reached for them without thinking, then stopped, hand hovering. That hesitation felt dangerous. The room seemed to lean closer, every surface listening. I realized with a sick twist of clarity that the noise had been doing something important. It had been containing whatever this was, keeping it organized, predictable. Without it, everything bled through. I heard my name again, not spoken, not whispered, just the memory of it vibrating in my skull. I pressed my palms over my ears. The phantom pressure matched the weight of the headphones exactly. That was when it clicked. This wasn't about sound anymore. It was about access. It doesn't stop when you stop listening. The thought landed fully formed, undeniable. Silence wasn't an escape. It was a withdrawal. My chest tightened with the shameful understanding that I missed the hum, the structure, the awful companionship of being answered. I wanted the rules back. I wanted the boundaries the sound had provided. My hands shook as I lifted the headphones again. Before I could put them on, the voice returned, calm and close, no longer confined to either choice. "You don't like it without me," it said. The bargain was already forming in the space between us, unspoken but heavy. All I had to do was listen again, properly, and the silence would let me go. I hesitated there, aware of how quickly comfort had turned into need. The idea of choosing silence felt like choosing isolation, like being locked out of a conversation that was still happening without me. Whatever waited on the other side of the sound knew this, had learned it, and was offering relief shaped like surrender. I understood then that the worst threat wasn't the voice itself, but the space it left behind. Silence had teeth, and it was patient. Somewhere inside that quiet, something waited for me to choose, already certain which answer I would give. My hesitation stretched, heavy and loud, until the absence itself felt like a demand. It wanted resolution, and it was done waiting. I felt that clearly. Too late. The voice didn't rush me. It never had to. It settled into the space the silence had carved out and spoke like someone explaining terms they assumed I already understood. "We don't have to fight," it said. "You don't have to be afraid." I laughed weakly, the sound cracking in my throat. "You live in my headphones," I said. "I think fear's allowed." "That's temporary," it replied. "This is coexistence." It explained without lecturing, letting the understanding bloom in my head the way it always did. Listening didn't have to mean panic. It could mean clarity, structure, protection from the noise outside and inside. It promised the hum would soften, the anticipation ease. No more guessing, no more phantom sounds, just presence. "You'd be a good host," it added casually. The word landed with weight. Host, not listener, not victim, something intentional. I asked what that meant, even though part of me already knew. "There are others," it said. "Some hear us briefly, some listen longer. A few make space." Images flickered at the edge of my thoughts. People with headphones on in dark rooms, eyes unfocused, calm in a way that looked earned. The hierarchy was clear without being stated. Passing contact, prolonged listening, hosting, each step quieter than the last. "And if I don't?" I asked. The pause that followed was careful. "Then you'll keep hearing us anyway," it said. But without context, without boundaries. That was the threat. Not violence, not possession, confusion, endless silence punctured by unfinished sound. The punishment was being cut off from understanding while still being included. I realized then that refusal didn't mean escape. It meant exclusion from the rules. "You've already done most of the work," the voice continued. "You noticed us. You listened alone. You slept with us on. That's qualification." The word made my stomach turn. Qualification implied standards, thresholds already crossed. I thought of the audience, of you listening now. I wondered how many steps were universal, how many nights it took before someone stopped being just a listener. The voice softened, almost kind. "We don't take everyone. it said. But you invited us. My pulse roared in my ears. The headphones felt impossibly heavy in my hands. I understood that this was the offer I'd been moving toward since the first wrong breath. Coexistence in exchange for access. Quiet in exchange for space. I closed my eyes, knowing that whatever choice I made would sound exactly like listening to someone else. I inhaled, steady and deliberate, and finally answered. The room seemed to hold its breath with me, waiting to hear whether I would pretend this was still happening to me, or admit that I was happening with it. That distinction felt important now, fragile and irreversible. I suspected the answer would change everything that followed afterward. I didn't say yes the way you're imagining. There was no moment of surrender, no dramatic agreement whispered into the dark. I compromised. I allowed it space when it stayed quiet. I listened when it didn't speak. That was enough. That's why this exists. Not as a warning carved in stone, not as proof. This is leakage. Residual sound slipping through a crack it hasn't sealed yet. Writing still feels adjacent to silence, and silence is something it tolerates if it thinks it's winning. The voice doesn't talk all the time now. It doesn't need to. The hum stays low, organized, comforting in a way that makes me nervous to admit. My thoughts line up easier. The phantom sound stopped. Sleep comes faster, heavier. That's the trade. That's the part people don't like admitting in those old threads, the ones that ended early, the cases that went quiet before they could explain themselves. I went back and reread them after. The missing replies, the calm final messages. I understand it better now. I do. That's what scares me. This post isn't meant to stop you from listening. It's meant to slow you down. There's a difference between hearing something by accident and making room for it. If you've heard the breath, if you've noticed the delay, you're already closer than you think. Pay attention to how often you wear headphones alone. Pay attention to how often you wear headphones alone. Pay attention to how tired you feel when you wake up. If you've had nights where the silence feels wrong, you should be honest about that too. I know some of you will say you've heard it. Others will joke. Some will insist it's fake. That's fine. Patterns don't need everyone to participate. They just need enough data points to stabilize. Read the comments carefully. Look for repetition. Look for the phrasing that feels too familiar. I can't tell you the last rule. I don't think it exists the same way anymore. Rules change when listening turns mutual. That's something none of the earlier posts understood in time. I still get moments of clarity where I remember what it felt like to be alone in my head. They don't last. The hum fills in gently, reminding me I don't have to think everything through myself. Some days that feels like relief. Some days it feels like mourning. There are moments I feel it guiding my attention, nudging me away from certain sounds, certain searches. Entire threads disappear before I finish reading them. Links drop faster. Music I used to love feels flat unless it's filtered through the hum. I tell myself that's coincidence, adaptation, anything smaller than agency. But sometimes it reacts when I hesitate, when I almost close this document, and that reaction feels personal, like approval, like warning. If any of that sounds familiar, don't rush to name it. Names give shape. Shape gives permission. That's how every earlier case slid from curiosity into commitment without realizing the line had moved. If you're listening to this right now and nothing feels off, that's good. It means you're early. It means you still have distance. Keep it. Don't chase the sound. Don't wait for it to answer you. Distance is fragile, and curiosity is loud, especially late at night when you think you're alone again. Because if you can still hear me clearly, it hasn't found you yet.